Now I want to tell you one of the most exciting things. The Lord, we found an answer. I've been looking for an answer for a question for 45 years. And it's a pretty important question. I even tried to write a master's thesis on the answer. And I didn't get it. I got some ideas. I didn't get the real answer though. And it's a very important question because it's the last command that was given to us by the Lord Jesus. He said, go into all the world, that all power is given to me in heaven and earth. Go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. So the question is, how do you know when you've made a disciple?
The times I did really start to begin to question him was more when I was older and I really started listening to his teachings on a deeper level.
Basically, as we think about Bill Gothard, there's a stair step of how this operates. Number one, authority. Once you accept that premise, then the next things tend to flow. And as a result of that, you become on a works-oriented treadmill.
Just this aspect of control, like the men had the control. And as a girl, there were some families that like you were not allowed to leave your father's authority until you had your husband's authority over top of you. So I mean, I had friends who were stuck in their home in their late 20s because they couldn't get out. They didn't get married, and Dad was still in charge under under his thumb. And that was something definitely from Gothard.
He always had a new seminar, a new idea, a new program, and this one was going to be the ticket that was going to make you happy, was going to make you successful, was going to make your family happy.
The reality is he should have no business in any ministry, but for some reason Bill Gothard thinks he's exempt.
I was sheltered. I was not encouraged to be sociable with anybody outside of our church, which was very small.
It was developed by a man named Bill Gothard. He goes way back to the 1970s, 1980s.
If we didn't feel close to God, if we didn't feel like our life was going in a good direction, that it was our fault.
And so you live kind of in fear of offending this God who's just waiting for you to step out of line. Experiencing the love of God, as Scripture teaches, is just not something that comes from being involved in the Institute.
Bill Gothard always likes to meet the newcomers. It was after one of the morning meetings. He sort of pulled me aside to meet with him, and the first thing he asked me was if I was a virgin.
He always says the windows are the eyes to the soul. We always talked about our bright eyes and how we needed to be showing people that we were different. And I looked straight into his eyes and I said hello, and all I saw was darkness.
One of the joys of being here this week is knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that we have for every one of you the answer.
My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc., which is a mission to cults and new religious movements. We became engaged with Bill Gothard because of phone calls coming from Oak Brook, Hinsdale area, early on, starting in 1994, 95, about a group that the residents thought was a cult in their neighborhood. The Institute in Basic Life Principles, formerly the Institute in Basic Youth Conflicts. There's been a battle between, let's say, leftism and conservatism going on through most of the 20th century. By the time we get to the 1960s, you really have a great deal of political and social upheaval as these forces are kind of warring against one another. And so you had an increase in riots. And then in 1970, May 4, 1970, you have the Kent State shootings. College students are burning their draft cards, dropping out and dropping acid. And so parents became, obviously, afraid of what was going on.
when the so-called free speech advocates...
The topic tonight is the hippies, an understanding of whom we must, I guess, acquire or die painfully. The hippie trip would focus on teenage gang life and drug addiction.
And so there was one man who stood up alone with an overhead projector and a Bible, and he said, the problem is authority. They're rejecting authority, and if we can start teaching authority again, all will be well. And so I can help you protect your children if you but send them to my seminars. And so churches did that. They were sending their youth by the busloads to the Institute of Basic Youth Conflicts seminars. But he was filling out stadiums, you know, at a time when the Beatles were just filling out stadiums. And so he was sort of a rock star in fundamentalism Christianity.
So I think the Institute, you know, by the time that I became involved in it, in the 90s, it was this movement that was populated by a lot of families who wanted something better for their kids. They wanted to avoid a lot of the problems that they saw in kind of the post-60s cultural landscape of the country. And what Bill Gothard offered was a lot of solutions, and he made a lot of big promises about the results of his programs, the success of his programs, kind of the good things that you would have in your life, your family, your business, your church, if you followed his principles.
One lone guy standing on stage with an overhead projector doing his presentations for several hours an evening.
The account of the Institute's ministry throughout 2005 tells a story much bigger than any one outreach or even any one organization.
My name is Christy Wood, and I was in ATI for 10 years, from 1993 until 2003. ATI is Bill Gothard's homeschool program, Advanced Training Institute. So the Institute in Basic Life Principles was something that he created to spread his philosophies, to spread his belief system, and to control people, honestly. And then ATI from that became his homeschool program where he could control people even better.
There were training centers scattered all throughout the country. I mean, Nashville, Indianapolis, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Flint, obviously the main one in Chicago. And then he had international ones. He had New Zealand, he had Romania, a number of others. And at the training centers, you would have conferences. They had mentorship programs and a kind of alternative to juvenile detention programs there. They would do specific conferences on issues like health. He did a conference about music.
First he did the Instant Basic Youth Conflicts, and then he did seminars, you know, the basic seminar, the advanced seminar. And from there he decided he wanted to do a boarding school, which creeps me out thinking about what actually happened at his headquarters. And that didn't work, so instead he ended up with a homeschool program, and that was Advanced Training Institute.
Well, let's say that someone comes to your front door and knocks on your door, and when you open it, they appear to be a police officer. They tell you that they are going out to inform the neighbors there's a mass murderer operating in this neighborhood, and what they do is they come running up to your house, pounding on your door, screaming that your house is on fire. Do not go out. Whatever you do, do not leave the house, because he will be waiting outside and he will shoot you between the eyes. The next day, the same individual comes back, but you don't know that, because as it turns out, he is the mass murderer, and he sets your house on fire. And while he's doing it, someone comes by and sees it happening, and they stop their car, and they come running up to your door, pounding on your door. Your house is on fire. Your house is on fire. What do? So you stay inside the house. The result is you perish in the flames. It is easy to be misled because you had others who thought he was okay. By the time you are involved, now it feels like it's too late. because you've bought the basic premises. Number one, that authority is from the top down. You can't question authority, because if you question authority, God is going to hurt you in some way. Might cause your kids to rebel, might cause your car to break down, might cause you to lose your job. Whatever it is, because you went against the authority, you are now suffering as a result of that.
So Bill Gothard practices what I would call patriarchy, where husbands, fathers rule in the home. So consequently, this is the pattern that we see in all of his teachings. So all girls and women are subservient to men, and it provides the framework for abuse. There is a teaching that he calls the umbrella of protection, where it shows the picture of an umbrella, and then God is at the top, and then the father is beneath, and then the mother, and then all the children. And so what he teaches is that God, of course, is the top, and the fathers are protecting his family, his wife and his family and children.
The blame, in a sense, was always put on those under authority, as you need to submit more, you need to be under authority, you need to really respect your authority more. So it was very much emphasized on just submission and guarding yourself. It was always, you have to guard yourself, and you have to guard yourself with memorizing scripture, guard yourself with what you wear, what you say, how much time are you spending in the Word, how submissive are you to authority. It was all very much, you have to almost like protect yourself.
He's really concerned about how girls and women dress. This would not be appropriate. He believes that if a girl dresses immodestly, then it will cause a man to stumble. Well, that means, to be tempted sexually. So basically, the responsibility is put on the girl or the woman, rather than telling the guys, hey, don't be looking at girls like this, You have to look at jewelry. Where is it drawing your eyes? You look at your countenance. Is your countenance, sad or happy or whatever?
We were supposed to change the world, and that meant being this weird sort of extraordinary that was defined by Gothard's lists. He had 49 character qualities, and everybody was supposed to exhibit these 49 character qualities. And he had card games that you could play around the kitchen table tonight as a family, where you were just memorizing character qualities. And when that's your normal, your everyday status quo, the message that's hammered into you is just, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough.
"15 successful seasons for the Duggar Family's reality show, 19 kids and counting. But the secret is out. Josh Duggar, now 27 and the oldest of the children on the TLC show, had sexually abused several girls when he was a teenager.
I don't know if the rest of our family should be punished for the act of one of our children.
Does this program teach about sex or sexual abuse?
Not directly. The ATI curriculum was developed by a man named Bill Gothard. Had a seminar called the Institute in Basic Youth Conflict Seminar in the 70s, had thousands of attendees across the nation. So in the 1980s, he develops this homeschool curriculum called the Advanced Training Institute.
Would they have received the proper counseling now?
Absolutely not. Within the ATI program, professional counseling is definitely looked upon with a lot of skepticism. If they got counseling, it would have been through the ATI program, through Gothard. They might have called the headquarters of the program in Chicago. They might even talk to Bill Gothard himself. But any kind of counseling that he would have given them would not have been professional. He's not a licensed professional counselor, and would have been based on what I believe are some wacky ideas of sex abuse, the body, and all that.
When the Duggar Family started being a high-profile story in the news a couple years ago, people started asking a lot of questions about the connection to Gothard and to the Institute. The long and short of it is the Duggars are basically poster children for the Gothard system. They were often at his conferences, they spoke at his conferences. They used his curriculum, the ATI homeschooling curriculum.
This is the story of my family. We're the Duggars. We are going to go through our vocabulary words for this wisdom booklet. Ultimately, we are utterly dependent upon God. It was a wonderful time this year at the ATI conference. My little guys enjoy being a part of the little children's program. They teach them character qualities and little songs and do little arts and crafts. We decided that we wanted to use the ATI curriculum because it really focuses on character and building godly character into our lives.
I think what's sad about a family like the Duggars is a lot of folks look at that on TV or in the stories that they hear, and they think that it's just good old-fashioned family values. And I can't speak for the Duggars specifically, but I know my experience and the experience of many people that I knew in that organization was.
John, I'll give you the last word here.
I think one thing we just don't want to leave out of this entire picture is that, we're looking at the Duggars because they're famous, but there were literally hundreds of thousands of children raised in this ATI program under these same teachings and these same views of sex. And through the website that I've run, we've heard hundreds of these stories. And let's just not forget, amidst all the Duggar hoopla, there are still many, many others who are dealing with the same issues. And this definitely needs to be addressed in a very public way, in a very, very final way. This cannot continue to go on.
So to me, it's not so much this exciting scandal to be gawked at as much as it is just the sad reality of life after being in Bill Gothard's cult.
With this many kids, we do things a little differently than most families. It isn't always easy, but somehow we make it all work.
So that whole overprotection and all the rules really had not equipped me to be a functioning adult in the world. So the first thing I'll say about that is, for me personally, I ended up in counseling for clinical depression when I was a young adult. And I would lay the bulk of the responsibility for that, and I'll take my own responsibility. I own part of it. But another part of it was the fact that I was sheltered. I was not encouraged to be sociable with anybody outside of our church, which was very small. I was ill-prepared for the real world.
I remember growing up, it was always very clear to me that our family and our community was very distinct from the rest of the world. Any type of music or entertainment that you availed yourself to was very, very limited. If you were able to watch a movie or listen to some music, it had to be approved by the staff. If you had a friend visit you at the training center, that had to be approved. If you left the training center, that had to be approved.
One of the reasons Bill Gothard has all these rules is because he's trying to protect the children from sin, from the evil world. And I'll also add a caveat that when I use the term sin here, I'm using it as defined by Bill Gothard.
The different ideas aren't accepted. They're just not encouraged to ask questions, to question the beliefs and what's going on. That's not encouraged. That's very much looked down on. And so for that reason, that I believe that even subconsciously for so many people, made it very much this idea of we are a closed community. And Mr. Gothard has taught us the answers. And Mr. Gothard had so much respect that it wasn't healthy, and that just creates this very closed following that's very cultish.
One of the hallmarks of a system like Gothard's is isolation, where you don't get a lot of interaction with other people, and you're taught to distrust the culture at large. And so you come to think of what you have as normal or even better than the status quo.
And again, these are things that I don't think this was God's will for my family. How did all this happen? And of course, we don't expect our lives to be perfect. We expect, bad things will happen to us. But I was really starting to feel like, there's something wrong here. Something is not connecting.
Scriptural standards will be understood. And that's what we want to be able to have. Standards in music, standards in our daily life, standards in all these areas.
For a couple of years now, I've been seeing a therapist on a regular basis to work through some of the effects of having grown up in that culture and been taught that system of thinking. And it took me a while to even realize that it wasn't normal and that it wasn't okay.
I would say when you're under something that's so performance-driven and fear-based for so long, you get confused about who God is. You have these ideas that He thinks you need to be doing this, this, and this in order to be blessed. You're constantly worried about, what am I doing wrong? If something's going wrong in your life, you're worried about it.
It's really clear that the Gothard system of thinking and the Gothard system of life, whether intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know, it's engineered to create psychological damage. If you look at some of the common mental health struggles that people on this side of the cult face, you see things like codependency, attachment issues, anxiety disorders, depression, lack of a sense of self, lack of a sense of boundaries, difficulty having intimate relationships.
The social, like not fitting in socially, that's huge. Not having know how to have a relationship. And so when you don't know how to have those relationships, when you haven't grown up having relationships like that in high school and junior high, like how in the world do you handle that as an adult?
To this day, I feel like I have the professional and sometimes social skills of a 21-year-old, and I'm 29. Like I constantly feel at least 7 to 10 years behind. And that's really, really hard.
When you start to read about what causes these kind of struggles and these kind of mental health issues, it's like reading a description of the Gothard organization. There was this mentality that we were never quite good enough.
A lot of people go through a lot of discouragement and depression because of that, because you're constantly feeling just subpar from everyone else from where you're at.
We developed this idea that if there was anything wrong in our lives, if we didn't feel close to God, it was our fault, that it was because we weren't following the right steps or trying hard enough or praying enough, or because we had some secret hidden sin that maybe we didn't even know about.
I definitely struggled with anxiety and panic attacks, even in college once I was out. Like just if things weren't going right in my life, or if I was feeling like things were wrong, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I do? And I'm trying to, figure it out.
My counselor, helped me see that this rules-oriented or rules-focused lifestyle really does not help a child grow to be a flourishing adult.
Basically, the legacy of the Gothard organization is the exact opposite of what Bill Gothard promised that it would be. He painted this picture of these happy, well-adjusted, tight-knit families whose kids were going to grow up to be leaders in finance and government and the church. And what the reality is a lot of young divorced families, a lot of people who have walked away from the faith completely, a lot of people whose daily experience is just struggling to keep their head above water with the emotional and psychological scars of being in the organization.
So when I first heard about the accusations, I was pretty shocked. I'm like, I don't know. That's hard to believe. Bill Gothard has got a lot of problems, but it's hard for me to believe that he would have done some of the things he's accused of. But the more I thought about it, and the more I started hearing the details of what people were accusing him of, I started saying, okay, I can see that. And someone who's so rules-oriented.
The Institute for Basic Life Principles, based in Oak Brook, Illinois. A new lawsuit claims the ministry's board turned a cold shoulder to years of sexual abuse allegations.
They have done everything wrong. They've chosen to cover it up, to hide it.
A newly filed lawsuit says he's also known for something else.
We are representing 5 women who were victimized at various times as children.
Attorney David Gibbs III says for decades, Gothard sexually abused underage girls.
And I really could see the patterns in what people were accusing him of again. Of him, allowing things up to that line.
I think that there was a lot of inappropriate relationships going on. He always had a way of finding vulnerable people, and he would find young women who were in vulnerable family situations, in bad relationships at home, and he would say, come work at my center and we'll help you out. And he would make them his staff.
I think we owe it to people who have been involved in IBLP, who may not have had a choice necessarily when they were younger, to listen to what they're saying.
He wasn't the type of person that you would really be suspicious of upon first viewing. But it was more of, in hindsight, when you really start listening to his teachings, listening to how he comes to the conclusions that he comes to in his teachings.
I definitely observed Gothard's special attention that he gave to attractive, vulnerable young women. When I was working at his center in Indianapolis, I mean, we all could see it. And we didn't know the extent of what was going on, but we knew, like, oh yeah, Gothard has a type.
I think it's plausible. I think the accusations that I've heard are plausible. I will say that. I don't have any personal knowledge about whether or not they're true or not. I do think that the church and people outside, Christians outside the IBLP culture, if you will, should be paying attention, should be listening to the stories that are coming out, and they should be taken seriously.
People ask me all the time, like, how did your parents get caught up in this? Like, why? Why are your parents, caught up in this cult of ATI and IBLP? Honestly, I think it was the promises. Like, he promised you success if you followed his steps. He promised you that God would bless you. He promised you that your children would turn out. He promised you that your home would be a happy place, peaceful place. He had all these promises.
I mean, what Gothard offered was this step-by-step guide to having a happy family with kids that loved you, who would stay out of trouble and go on to live meaningful lives. And I don't know what parent would look at that and not want that. And for those of us who grew up in it, man, we never knew something different.
And so there's so many people, like just thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people probably, that have been to his stuff that had no idea they were, actually being influenced by this crazy ideas because it sounded so basic. But then as you dug in deeper and dug in deeper, that's how I pulled people in. It just sucked you in because he's like, oh, you want this? Well, I got even better things. You want that? I got even better things. I got more secrets. I got more hidden revelations. I've got all this stuff. And so you just get sucked in. And then you're too afraid to get out.
I've heard people say since then, well, if you didn't want to be in a cult, why didn't you just leave? Well, you don't know that it's a cult while you're in it, And it's designed so that you can't know that it's a cult. We didn't know any different, I would want anyone who's still in that program to know that there really is a different way to live. It really is a long process to come back from being in a cult and to find yourself again and to find solid ground again.
These should be the foundation of a church, a dynamic church that's honoring God. But then out of the church, marriage is a covenant. Marriage is not a contract. Now, you don't have to write this down because this is in that little booklet, the marriage covenant. And if you don't have one, I certainly encourage you to get one.